Carrying on with John's Gospel. Last week, feeding of the 5,000. It's coming off the end of that now, they're walking on the water. John 6:15. Jesus, therefore, perceiving that they were intending to come and take him by force to make him king, withdrew again to the mountain by himself alone. Now when evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, and after getting into a boat, they started to cross the sea to Capernaum. And it had already become dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. And the sea began to be stirred up because a strong wind was blowing. When therefore they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they beheld Jesus walking on the sea and drawing near to the boat, and they were frightened. But he said to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." They were willing therefore to receive him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at the land to which they were going. Travelling around on in the area, travelling across the Sea of Galilee or Lake Tiberias or whatever it is, it's a bit like the M25 of Israel. You didn't want to walk all around the place. You always travelled across because normally the sea was better and it was better by boat, and obviously there's a lot less distance to cross over. So you want to think of the boats going backwards and forwards quite regularly to these various places. What is interesting in this account of the sort of rowing into storm and Jesus coming to them, I say this because there will be other accounts and other details in other places, and other things happen, and the gospel writers tell us a variety of crossing the sea. In this account that John gives us, however, we do not have much of the drama that we have with the others. We do not have lots of the detail we have lots of others. For a preacher, there's not lots of things to say, oh, I could talk about that, I could talk about that. In fact, it doesn't have much in it at all, which is encouraging, really, because it doesn't make it too specific. None of us can think this morning, oh, that's not me. They just got into the boat and rowed. And it says basically that the sea was ruffled or troubled by the wind. I think this means choppy. You sometimes get this down on the prom, don't you, when the tide is up, but the wind is from the east. You know, great surf and all that stuff. It's just, it just splashes on the prom. You go out in a small boat, it's very uncomfortable, not life-threatening. But it's that kind of broken water, that sort of restless sea business, and it says that the wind was just ruffling the waves, sort of thing. It is not an enormous gale. They are not, as in other circumstances, about to sink and about to drown. Neither have they been sent on their journey by Jesus, so they're rowing hard in the missionary effort. Neither is Jesus sitting lying in the boat asleep, apparently not doing anything. That's another story. Neither is Peter trying to walk on the water. That's another story. They're just rowing on a choppy night. The wind is probably in their faces because otherwise they put up a scrap of sail. They're rowing, but they're not dying. This is not a Titanic situation. I think this is tremendously important and encouraging. Jesus will deal with us in all of our crises. Jesus is able to deal with all crises, but Jesus does not only come in crises. This is a great picture of normal life. It is choppy. It is not easy. Often things are against us. But we get through. It's just normal life. And sometimes it's more like that, and sometimes it's less like that. But I'm thinking that here is something which is a bit difficult. A darkness in John gives us a bit of a foreboding. It's not cheerful. It is hard work. They are getting wet. They are getting cold. But it's not the end of the world. It's just that we have in our gardens and our allotments weeds that do come up. It doesn't mean you're being done by Japanese knotweed, all right? We do have our computers that do sort of go wrong and do freeze. It doesn't mean you've been done by the worst virus in the world. We do fall over and hurt ourselves and our children and all this sort of thing. You've got to put a Alastair plaster on or take aspirin. You're not in Trelisk with tubes in you, you know? We are busy and tired, but we get through. It's not oh my gosh, I need counselling. There's a lot of stuff in between this. This is just a choppy sea. And I say this to encourage you because this applies to you on an average week. Even on a week like this, in my job, it has been quite choppy. There's been a lot of stuff going on, which I think, I could do without this. But it's not the end of the world. Some people think it is, but it's not, you know. So it's hugely relevant to us as this comes to us. And you'll notice that a couple of other things about this which are encouraging and interesting, I think. The first is that not because they're not sinking, they're still in the boat and they're still making progress. They know where they're going. It might be slow going, but they're going there. They're in the boat and they are rowing, and it is an effort and it is into the wind, but they are getting back to Capernaum. That's it. They are doing that. They are doing that. And they're not alone. There's a team of them rowing. So there is a situation in which you think these people are getting on, getting by. We do get by with a little help from our friends. We do get by. We with a bit of effort, you can make progress. And they know where they're going. They're going home to Capernaum. You know, they know. So they are not lost and they're not stuck. They're not going in the wrong direction either. Jesus doesn't turn up and tell them off, turn them around and make them go back again. That's okay where they're going. In fact, when they see him, they get there. So this is not a big, sinful, terrible thing. But they're just getting on. Which brings us to the other thing about where is Jesus in all this. Jesus went off up into the hills on his own, intentionally. They don't follow him. Other times they did follow him, and that's a bit of a pain. So they don't follow him, but you could have said they should have waited on the beach for him to come back. Well, they didn't wait for him to come. They just went home and took the boat home. This is not huge sort of disobedience. This is not denial. This is not betrayal. This is not them like even after Easter when they go fishing because they don't believe in the resurrection. They are disciples. They follow Jesus. They believe in Jesus. But that night they're just taking the boat home. Where is Jesus? He will turn up. You know? They weren't expecting him to turn up the way he turned up. But he's going to turn up anyway. And this represents for me the sort of thing where I'm a Christian, I'm a disciple, I'm not having a life crisis, I'm not having a crisis of faith, but this bit, you just got to get on and do it, you know? You just got to do it. It's mended, fix it. You need to go there, go there. You've got to do that, you've got to do that, you've got to dig it up, you've got to take it down, you've got to make a phone call, you've got to deal with your texts, you know? We're very spiritual in the band, but sometimes Frank's just got to come up and fiddle with something or nothing works. You know? There's such a lot of practical, ordinary stuff in our lives that where we go through a phase of, well, I've just got to do this. Get on with it, for goodness sake. Jesus is not going to cook a Sunday lunch. You know, go home and do it sort of thing. That's a bit of... I'm not saying that's right. But I'm saying that that's what we do without a great loss of faith. And they're in that kind of situation. We're rowing home in the dark. It's hard work. We're wet. Jesus is somewhere. Now, all those things, I think, are hugely relevant to the average week. When you are not sinking, you've not lost your faith, you are going somewhere, it is choppy, but you're getting through with a few friends and a bit of effort. Great setting. So what happens? Well, Jesus turns up walking on the water. Two initial things from that. First of all, Jesus turns up. In other words, Jesus is pretty well going the same place as they are. He's on the journey with them. He's on the journey. One of the things that's often missed by commentators about Jesus walking on the water, they always say what it signifies, how important it is, but it's also one way of getting from one side of the lake to the other. Chooses not to walk around the edge, chooses not to get a cosmic speedboat. He just walks, all right? But it means that he walks on the same journey as they are. Just take that on board. Where you are in your life, Jesus is shadowing you. Jesus is close to you. Jesus is on... And that's not just a sort of theological feeling about it. I mean, say I'm paddling across the bay in my kayak. Sometimes looking up into the sky, I can see one of these transatlantic airliners. You can see the contrails zooming across the sky, and I think we're both going on a journey, but it's not the same kind of journey, is it? And you can say, well, God is with us. Yeah, God is running the universe, and I'm down here paddling away. This is not like this. This is at ground level. That Jesus is actually going through with you the choppiness that you have. Not just theoretically and super spiritually, but actually. Huh? That is encouraging, is it not? I mean, it's even encouraging that Jesus is not up on a mountain somewhere praying for you, but he is actually walking across the choppy bits with you. I think that's encouraging. He was there when you thought you were just rowing on your own. What a good disclosure that is. And he is walking on the waves. Now, St. John clearly wants to demonstrate here that he is, as we would say, the master of the waves. It must be incredibly difficult to walk on waves. It must be incredibly difficult to walk on flat water, mustn't it? If you don't believe this, if you think that this is the sort of thing that happens in the Bible, do what I have done occasionally. Not here, but I've done it elsewhere. Find a lily pond or go down on a calm day down to the boating lake, right? Stand on the side when nobody else is looking and thinks you're a loony. This is true. You try this and you just put your foot on there. Just put your foot on the water and think, this is very difficult. I told you the story before. At the chaplain's department headquarters, as it then was at Bagshot, there was a big rectangular lily pond in the formal gardens of this great mansion. And because it was the Army Chaplain's Department headquarters, there was a lovely wrought iron sign at the end which said, please do not walk on the water. And you think, we're not going to do this. Jesus is walking on. Jesus is master of the waves. In other words, all your choppiness, all your problems, all your difficulties, Jesus has them in hand. He walks on them. It's almost divinely dismissive, isn't it? He walks on them. They're going like choppiness does in the sea. And he's just walking on them because he is the master of the waves. He's with us and he is the master of the waves. The commentator will tell you that because this was the Passover time, there is an allusion in here to the Passover and to the crossing of the Red Sea. You get a great, something like in a great verse like Psalm 77:19 echoes this. Thy way is in the sea, and thy path in the great waters, and thy footsteps are not known. That sense that God is of the sea, but when it says, but this is like the Red Sea and the parting of the Red Sea and Israel coming across the sea, I think yes and no. We often feel that we like the picture of the Red Sea. God brings them to the edge of the Red Sea and Moses puts out his staff and God parts the sea and they walk through on dry land. God did that then because it was appropriate. Can you imagine how difficult it would have be to get hundreds of thousands of people to walk on the water? It was bad enough getting Peter to walk on the water. So he parts the sea and they walk through. But I want to suggest to you that if you in your spiritual life think this is the picture for you, I have problems, I have difficulties, I'm being swamped, Lord, please part the waters, part the difficulties, and I will walk through with you. Well, that might have to happen sometime, but this other picture is often more characteristic of what's going on. The Lord is here, the Lord is master of the waves, and I am still rowing. I am still rowing. That mixture, that nexus of I'm getting wet, I'm rowing, but the Lord is with me. I am safe, but I'm not out of this. Is that not a characteristic of how we feel about our spiritual lives? We do not find all the time that the waves are parted, it's all over, and we can just walk through to the other side. He's here with you on the journey. He's the master of the turbulence, but you are still rowing and you are still getting wet. I think that's a good place to be this morning to start off with. It's not a tidy place. It doesn't make a tidy sermon, but I think you need to hear that because that's what life is like, not just honed down to 3 tidy points. He's with us. He's the master of the waves. I'm still getting wet. I need you to work with me on this because it doesn't end there, because this is not a stable situation. If you make that a stable situation, you're the sort of Christian, and we are the sort of church that says, we believe that Jesus is near us, we believe that Jesus is the master of the waves. That inspires us to row better. There's a whole strand of theology that says that. And I'm saying, okay, I'm rowing better, but Jesus is not doing a lot except hanging around on the waves. This is not what John said, because this is unstable. Because as the disciples sense his presence, they cannot get this encouragement. Jesus is here, Jesus walking on the water. They cannot get the encouragement without the encounter, because they are not saying, oh, what a relief Jesus is here. They are terrified. Jesus is not just walking along by them. Jesus is converging on them, coming towards the boat. There is a crisis brewing at this point, because they realize that walking on the water is something for God or angels or some spiritual being. They are terrified. The reality of being comforted by Jesus being with you and on the waves is countered by the terror of the whole thing. This is a major supernatural experience. Otherwise, it becomes one of those spiritual placebos, like we used to have in Sunday school, where suddenly, with the flannelgraph, Jesus is standing on the water and all the disciples have smiley faces. This is not what life is like. Now, this is a terrible thing. This is a frightening thing. This is the Almighty God who comes on the waves to be with us in the middle of the sea. We are comforted because we are discomforted. We are encouraged because we are encountered by the living God. It's a bit like, I always think in the Christmas stories, where the angel turns up, as angels do, and they're terrified. The first thing the angel says is, do not be afraid. And you feel like saying, with all reverence, sir, if you hadn't turned up, I wouldn't be afraid, and you wouldn't need to say it. The angel then goes on to say something else, but you can feel that there is a tension between the two, an irony almost. And Jesus holds this thing in two as he comes to them and says, do not be afraid, it is I. And this is eyes of two things. In terms of the general encouragement of Jesus is with us, do not be afraid, it's me. It's me. But also because it's me walking on the water and being here in this supernatural being, there's something more to it than me just being on the beach saying it's me. He says ego eimi, and ego eimi is the Greek translation directly of what you get at the burning bush in Hebrew, I am who I am. This is the divine thing. Do not be afraid, I am. And you immediately think, if you were a Hebrew, I am very afraid at this point, as Moses would have been at the burning bush. I am comforted, and thus I am discomforted. I am encouraged because I am encountering. We need to take this. We cannot have this just this cuddly business of it's nice to be on the waves because Jesus is here. Without them, my God, literally, my God is here with me. And as the reality of the comfort comes, you have to have the reality of the awe. And I would suggest to you, if you haven't got any awe and you haven't got any slight, whoa, then you probably haven't got much comfort. It's just a divine spiritual placebo. We need a bit of the rough stuff out there in the night. Wow, because this is real. People don't walk on water unless it's God. And if it's God, hey. And so bring that together. And they do well. They say, you're welcome in the boat. It doesn't say he got into the boat, but they are open to that fact. We just think, how does that matter to me? How can it happen to me? Am I prepared to say, Lord, this is an awful experience. I am awestruck. You are a mighty God. I take this not for granted. Walking on the water is impossible, but for you. but come into my life. Encounter me and encourage me. That's a good thing to do. I hope that makes communion a little bit less easygoing this morning. But I would leave you with this, and you might like to go home and play with this idea. It's extraordinary what John says then. And immediately they were at the land. Doesn't say that Jesus stood up and calmed the storm. It doesn't say that they all got out the boat and walked across the sea to the bed. It doesn't say any of that at all. And they were at once on the shore. And there is a sense in which there is a resolution here that whatever bit of the journey you're on in your life today, whether it is a journey of 10 minutes, because you're thinking during the sermon, or whether it's 10 years, something that's going on in a phase of your life, Jesus does not just say, I am with you in this, but when you meet him in it, there is a sense in which it brings that phase of the journey to an end. There is a resolution. In other words, that journey in which they are rowing ends when they meet Jesus. Now, that might be an issue. They're trying to get to Capernaum, and they've got there. That's the end of the journey. There are things in your life which Jesus, when you finally meet with Jesus in the storm or in the choppiness, that in fact resolves it. That's back to the just one touch of the king changes everything sort of thing. But there is something slightly more profound here than that. There is the sense that every journey has Jesus as its destination, not Capernaum. That when I am finally met with Jesus in all this stuff, I realise that he was where I was wanting to go. As we said in our home group, that Capernaum is not home, this is home. As Augustine says, we are all restless until we find our rest in him. And then the next phase starts. They get to the beach. If you read the Gospels, that was that. This is this. Last week, this was feeding the 5,000. Now we're doing the water. Now we're walking off into another thing. But life is made up of thus of a series of journeys. But in each small part, even if it's your prayers for 5 minutes, or whether it is a major project this week, or whether this is part of your life, there is a resolution in Jesus. He comes, he is the master of the waves. He is awesome. We invite him into our boat. And that's that. Then there's something else. So that to meet with Jesus, that's your journey of your life, if you like, if you're very welcome to queue up in a moment to take this communion. When you take the communion, think, my journey coming to the table ends here. And when I go on, it's another journey. There's always a resolution. There's always an ending. There's always a destination in Jesus. Which, if you will work through that, is much more interesting than just keep rowing and be inspired.